Love, luxury, and a fight. The taste of salt and sand. Chapter 1. Fire meets earth. The Pacific wind cut through the cliffside like a knife as Shea stepped out of the taxi, her leather duffel bag slung over one shoulder. The Azure Bay hotel rose before her, a sprawling structure of white stone and glass that seemed to grow from the rocks themselves, perched on the edge of the Australian coast like a crown. The building was beautiful, she'd give it that. But beautiful didn't pay the bills, and according to the financial reports she'd memorized on the 15-hour flight from San Francisco, this place was hemorrhaging money. 1 Michelin star. 1. And they'd lost 2 in the past 3 years. She'd come to fix that. Shea had built her reputation in Oakland's most unforgiving kitchens, where being a 5-foot-tall black woman meant you had to be twice as good and 3 times as loud just to get a station. She clawed her way up from prep cook to executive chef by the time she was 28, and when the Azure Bay's parent company came calling with an obscene salary and the challenge of a lifetime, she'd packed her knives without hesitation. The lobby was all cool marble and driftwood, designed to whisper wealth without shouting it. A few guests lounged in leather chairs, sipping cocktails that probably cost more than her first apartment's monthly rent. The concierge, a woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled into a neat bun, looked up as Shea approached.
Shea Monroe.
The woman's smile was professional but warm. Welcome to Azure Bay, Mr. Kalani is waiting for you in his office. 2nd floor, East Wing. Tau Kalani, the hotel manager. Shea had seen exactly one photo of him in the briefing materials, a stiff corporate headshot that told her nothing except that he had a strong jaw and didn't smile for cameras. The dossier said he was 34, had been with the hotel for 6 years, and was well-respected by staff. That was code for either pushover or micromanager, in her experience. She took the stairs instead of the elevator, her boots echoing on the stone. The hallway was lined with Aboriginal art, the paintings and bark etchings that spoke of songlines and creation stories. Real pieces, not the mass-produced garbage she'd seen in other hotels trying to claim cultural authenticity. The door to the manager's office was open, and that's when she saw him. Tau Kalani wasn't just tall, he was a force of nature. 6 feet of broad shoulders and quiet strength, standing by the window with his back to her, silhouetted against the endless blue of the ocean. His skin was deep brown, his black hair pulled back in a low knot. He wore dark slacks and a white linen shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with traditional tattoos, intricate patterns that seemed to move in the afternoon light. When he turned to face her, Shea felt something shift in her chest. His eyes were dark, almost black, set in a face that was all strong angles and quiet intensity. He had the kind of presence that didn't need volume, the kind that made people lean in to listen. And hanging against his chest, over the open collar of his shirt, was a pendant carved from what looked like bone or horn, shaped into a hook design she didn't recognize but felt she should.
Shea Monroe.
His voice was deep, textured like aged whiskey. He didn't move from the window. Welcome. Shea dropped her bag and crossed the office, hand extended. Call me Shea. And you're Tau, right? Not Mr. Kalani? His hand enveloped hers, warm, calloused, strong enough to crush, but gentle in its grip. Just Tau. The handshake lasted a fraction too long. His eyes held hers with an intensity that made her want to look away and lean closer at the same time. She pulled back first, clearing her throat.
So.
1 star. Used to be 3. I'm here to get us to 4. Ambitious. The corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but close. The kitchen's been through 5 head chefs in 3 years. I'm not the other 5.
No.
His gaze traveled over her face, assessing. You're not. There was something in the way he said it that made heat crawl up her neck. Professional, she reminded herself. This was business. She had flown 15 hours and left behind everything familiar to get distracted by a pretty face and nice arms and eyes that seemed to see straight through her armor. The previous chefs, Shea said, forcing her focus back to business. What happened to them? Tau moved to his desk, gesturing for her to sit. She stayed standing. First one couldn't handle the isolation, he said, settling into his chair with an easy grace that shouldn't have been possible for someone his size. Out here, you're 45 minutes from the nearest town. Second one tried to cut costs by compromising quality. Third one was sleeping with half the wait staff and created a hostile work environment. Fourth one, let me guess, couldn't take criticism. Couldn't take direction. From anyone. He leaned back, fingers steepled. This hotel has history, Shea. My people, the Yuin people, we've been connected to this land for 60,000 years. When this hotel was built 50 years ago, it was supposed to honor that connection, not exploit it. Every chef who's come through here has treated this place like a stepping stone. Something to put on a resume. Shea met his eyes. And you think I'm the same? I don't know what you are yet. His gaze was steady, unflinching. But I know what this place needs. It needs someone who understands that excellence isn't just about technique or presentation or Michelin stars. It's about soul, about respect, about understanding where you are and what you're serving. Then show me. Shea crossed her arms. Show me what I need to understand. For the first time, Tau smiled, really smiled. It transformed his face, softening the hard edges into something devastating. Tomorrow, 6 a.m. Meet me at my cottage, and we'll walk the property. All of it. Not just the parts the guests see. 6 a.m. She picked up her bag. I'll be there.
Chef?
He stood as she reached the door. One more thing. She turned back. Out here, the ocean doesn't care about your reputation. The land doesn't care about your credentials. And the guests don't care about your ego. All that matters is the work. He paused. Can you handle that? Shea felt a slow smile spread across her face. Oh, she liked him. She shouldn't, but she did. Guess we'll find out, she said, and walked out before he could see the effect he'd had on her pulse. Chapter 2. The Walk. The knock came at 5:47 a.m. Shea was already dressed, running shorts, a fitted tank top, and her well-worn trail shoes. She'd barely slept, her body still on California time, and her mind racing with menu concepts and kitchen renovations. When she opened the door of her hotel suite, Tau stood in the hallway wearing board shorts and a faded t-shirt that had seen better days, his hair loose around his shoulders. You're early, he said. I don't sleep much. Neither do I. He gestured down the hall.
Come on.
We'll start with coffee. His cottage wasn't what she expected. Set back from the main hotel building, hidden by a grove of coastal she oaks, it was small and weathered, driftwood gray with a wraparound porch and windows that faced the ocean. Inside was sparse but comfortable, a worn leather couch, bookshelves crammed with everything from hotel management texts to poetry collections, a small kitchen that smelled like cardamom and coffee. You live here? Shea took in space. I thought the hotel manager would have. A suite in the main building? Tau poured coffee into 2 ceramic mugs, handmade, she noticed, with the same traditional patterns as his tattoos. I did for a while. Couldn't handle it. Too much distance between me and the land. He handed her a mug. Their fingers brushed. That same electric current from yesterday shot up her arm. This is where I was born, Tau continued, moving to the window. Not this cottage specifically, but this land. My grandmother's people have been here since the dreaming. My grandfather was a fisherman who worked these waters for 40 years. When the hotel was built, my father protested. Said it would destroy the sacred sites, corrupt the stories. He took a long sip of coffee. He was right about some of it, wrong about other parts. But you stayed, Shea said. Why? Tau turned to look at her, and in the pale dawn light, his eyes were impossibly dark. Because someone needs to make sure this place remembers what it's built on. Come on. The sun's almost up. They walked the property in near silence. Tau led her down narrow paths she never would have found on her own, trails that wound through coastal scrub and over volcanic rock, past hidden tide pools where blue-ringed octopi pulsed in the shallows. He pointed out native plants, coastal rosemary, pigface, banksia, with their strange flower spikes. He showed her where the wedge-tailed eagles nested and where the whales could be seen breaching during migration season. And he told her stories. This beach, he said as they stood on a stretch of white sand untouched by footprints, is where my grandmother taught me to read the water. See how the current moves there. He pointed to where the waves broke differently over a submerged rock formation. That's where the fish gather. And there, his hand shifted to a darker patch of water. That's where you don't swim. Rip current. It'll pull you out before you can scream. Shea watched the water, mesmerized. How do you know which is which? You learn to listen. He glanced at her. The ocean talks if you pay attention, just like food does in a kitchen. She felt something crack open in her chest. This man understood. Not just the work, but the philosophy behind it. The idea that greatness came from respect, from attention, from deep connection to your materials and your place. They climbed higher, up a rocky path that made Shea's calves burn. At the top was a flat outcropping of stone, and beyond it, the whole coast stretched out like a promise. Cliffs and beaches and endless blue water meeting endless blue sky.
Jesus, Shea abriated.
Not quite. There was humor in Tau's voice. But close. This is Gulaga. Sacred Mountain. The mother. We don't use the English name. He sat on the rock, long legs stretched out, and after a moment, Shea sat beside him. The stone was still cool from the night, but the rising sun was warming it fast. Tell me about Oakland, Tau said. Tell me what you left behind. It wasn't what she expected him to ask. But something about this place, this moment, made her want to answer honestly. I left behind a studio apartment I could barely afford, a restaurant where the owner was skimming tips, and a reputation for being difficult, Shea said.
She pulled her knees to her chest.
I left behind men who thought I'd won my position because I was pretty, not because I could outwork anyone in that kitchen. I left behind a city that's being priced out of its own culture. And I left behind, she stopped. What? Safety, she admitted. I left behind knowing exactly who I was and where I fit. Out here, I'm starting over. And that's terrifying. Tau was quiet for a long moment. Then, my grandfather used to say that the ocean remakes the shore with every tide. The rocks don't disappear, they just get polished into something new. Something stronger. He looked at her. You're not starting over, Shea. You're being remade. The way he said her name, low and careful, like it meant something, made her heart stutter. What about you? She turned to face him fully. What are you afraid of?
His jaw tightened.
Failure. Losing this place to people who don't understand it. watching my culture get turned into a commodity. He paused. And now, letting down a chef who might actually give a damn about what we're building. I give a damn, Shea said softly. I know. His hand moved, just slightly, toward hers on the rock. He didn't touch her, but she felt the heat of him. That's what scares me. The sun was fully up now, pouring gold over the water. They should go. She had a kitchen to inspect, staff to meet, suppliers to vet. There were 1,000 things that required her attention. But she didn't move. And neither did he. 6 a.m. tomorrow? Tau said finally. I'll take you to meet the fishermen. Show you what's actually available, what's sustainable. 6 a.m., Shea agreed. As they walked back down the mountain, their hands swung close but never quite touching, and Shea realized she was in trouble. The kind of trouble that had nothing to do with Michelin stars and everything to do with the way Tau's voice wrapped around her name like a prayer. Chapter 3, The Kitchen. The kitchen at Azure Bay was a cathedral of stainless steel and possibility. Industrial ranges, a wood-fired oven custom-built from local clay, a dry-aging room that could hold 200 pounds of meat. Counter space for days. And windows, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the ocean, flooding the workspace with natural light. It was everything Shea had dreamed of and nothing she'd ever had access to. It was also a complete disaster. What the hell is this? She held up a container of pre-made stock, reading the label with mounting horror. You're using commercial stock? In a Michelin-starred restaurant. The sous chef, a nervous 25-year-old named Marcus with a Melbourne accent and questionable knife skills, shifted his weight. The last chef said it was more consistent. The last chef was an idiot. Shea tossed the container into the trash. From now on, we make everything from scratch. Everything. I want to see bones roasting by end of day. She moved through the kitchen like a storm, opening every drawer, checking every station, tasting every pre-made sauce and component. The team watched her with a mixture of fear and fascination. 12 people, mostly young, mostly scared. Listen up, Shea said, hopping up to sit on the central counter, so everyone could see her. I know I'm the 6th head chef in 3 years. I know you're probably thinking I'll be gone in 6 months just like the others. And maybe I will be, if I can't get this kitchen to where it needs to be. She let that hang in the air. But here's what I need you to understand. I didn't come here for a paycheck or a line on my resume. I came here because I believe in excellence. I believe that food is more than just fuel. It's connection, it's culture, it's art. And I believe that every single person in this kitchen has the potential to create something extraordinary. Marcus raised his hand tentatively. What if we're not good enough? Then I'll make you good enough. Shea's voice was firm but not unkind. I'll train you, I'll push you, and yes, I'll probably make you want to quit at least once a week. But if you stick with me, if you commit to the work, I promise you'll leave this kitchen a better cook than when you started. She jumped down from the counter.
Now.
Who's my best fish butcher? A young woman with intricate tattoo sleeves stepped forward. I am. Casey. Casey, you're on seafood from now on. Show me your knife work. For the next 3 hours, Shea reorganized the entire kitchen. She moved stations, reassigned roles, threw out half the equipment that wasn't being used properly. She made Marcus break down a whole chicken 15 times until his technique was clean. She had Casey demonstrate her fish butchery on a whole kingfish Tau had arranged to be delivered, and nearly wept with relief when the girl's knife work was flawless. Where'd you learn that? Shea asked. My dad's a fisherman, Casey said, her hands steady as she separated the precious toro from the rest of the belly. Been filleting fish since I was 6. Perfect. I want you working directly with the local fishermen. I want to know what they're catching every day, what's in season, what's sustainable.
Can you do that?
Casey's face lit up. Yes, chef. Good. Meeting tomorrow at 5 a.m. We're going to the docks. Tau appeared in the kitchen doorway just as Shea was finishing her reorganization. He changed into his manager uniform, dark slacks, white shirt, a vest that somehow made his shoulders look even broader. The carved pendant still hung against his chest. How's it going? He asked. It's going. Shea wiped her hands on a towel. I need new suppliers for produce. The stuff coming in is garbage. And I need authorization to hire 2 more line cooks and a dedicated pastry chef.
Done.
Send me the job postings. He moved into the kitchen, and she noticed how the staff straightened up, how they greeted him with genuine warmth. He wasn't just respected, he was liked. I also need to show you something. He led her to the walk-in cooler, a massive space with multiple rooms for different temperature zones. In the back, past the vegetables and dairy, was a door she hadn't noticed before. What's this? Tau pulled out a key. The previous chef didn't know this existed. It's a vintage wine cellar and dry storage room, original to the hotel. Some of the bottles in here are 50 years old. He unlocked the door and gestured for her to enter first. The cellar was cool and dark, lit by a single bare bulb. Wooden racks lined the walls, stocked with bottles covered in dust. But it wasn't the wine that made Shea stop in her tracks. It was the photographs. Black and white images, framed and hanging on the far wall. The hotel in its early days. Indigenous workers and white managers standing together, unsmiling, in front of the building. A kitchen staff from the 1970s, all wearing tall toques. And in the center, A photo of a young Aboriginal man in chef's whites, standing proud beside an elaborate seafood display. Who is that? Shea moved closer. My grandfather. Tau stood beside her, close enough that his arm brushed hers. David Kalani. He was the first Aboriginal head chef in Australia. Worked here from 1972 to 1989. Created a menu that blended traditional indigenous ingredients with French technique. The hotel won its first Michelin star under him. Shea looked at the photo, at the resemblance between the young man and the one standing beside her. The same strong jaw. The same quiet intensity in the eyes. He's why you stayed, she said softly. He's why I exist. Tau's voice was rough. This hotel gave him opportunities he never would have had otherwise. But it also demanded he hide parts of himself. He couldn't use traditional names for ingredients. Couldn't explain the cultural significance of the native foods he was elevating. Had to make it palatable for white diners who wanted the exotic without the education. He turned to face her, and in the dim light of the cellar, his features were all shadows and angles. I need you to understand something, Shea. This kitchen, this hotel, it's not just business for me. It's legacy. It's reclamation. It's making sure my grandfather's work meant something. I understand, Shea said. And she did. She thought of her own grandmother, who'd cooked in southern kitchens for white families her whole life, whose recipes were borrowed without credit, whose skill was taken for granted. I won't let you down. I know you won't. His hand came up, and for a breathless moment, she thought he was going to touch her face. Instead, he pointed past her to a shelf. That's a 1973 Grange Hermitage. We should open it for the relaunch menu. Let my grandfather's legacy flavor the new chapter. They stood there in the cold cellar, surrounded by bottles and history and the weight of expectations neither of them wanted to disappoint. Shea, Tau said quietly. Why did you really come here? Not the official answer. The truth. She could feel his heat even in the cold room. Could smell him, salt and sandalwood, and something earthy she couldn't name. Because I wanted to build something that mattered, she admitted. Because I was tired of making other people's visions come true. Because I wanted. She stopped, the words catching in her throat. What? To be seen, she whispered. Really seen. Not as a diversity hire or a PR move or a pretty face in the kitchen, but as someone who can create something that lasts. Tau's hand moved then, his knuckles grazing her cheek with devastating gentleness. I see you, he said, his voice low and certain. I've seen you since the moment you walked into my office. The air between them crackled with possibility. Shea's pulse hammered in her throat. This was dangerous. This was unprofessional. This was everything she shouldn't want.
She wanted it anyway.
But before either of them could move, close the distance, cross that line, the cellar door burst open and Marcus appeared, breathless.
Chef.
We have a problem. The stove's on fire. The spell broke. Shea was already moving, racing past Marcus back into the kitchen, leaving Tau alone in the cellar with dusty bottles and the ghost of what almost happened. Chapter 4. Friction and Fire. The stove fire turned out to be minor. An inexperienced line cook had let oil get too hot, but it set the tone for the next 6 weeks. Every day brought a new crisis, a new challenge, a new reason for Shea to work 18-hour days until her hands cramped and her eyes burned. But slowly, impossibly, the kitchen began to transform. She implemented new systems, new standards, new respect for ingredients. She brought in local indigenous women to teach the staff about native plants, bush tomatoes, lemon myrtle, wattleseed, finger limes. She worked with Casey to establish direct relationships with fishermen so they knew exactly what was being caught and when. She even convinced Tau to let her tear out the herb garden and replant it with traditional food plants alongside the European varieties. The menu she created was ambitious, a celebration of this specific place and its layered histories. Grilled kangaroo with Davidson plum and crispy native greens. Local abalone with macadamia cream and sea vegetables. Reef fish wrapped in paperbark and cooked over shio coals. Each dish was a story, a conversation between cultures, an honoring of the land. And through it all, there was Tau. He was everywhere and nowhere, a constant presence she couldn't escape and couldn't quite reach. He'd appear in the kitchen at odd hours with a bottle of wine to sample, asking her opinion on the vintage with those dark, assessing eyes. He'd leave notes on her office door, updates on suppliers, information about upcoming events, and once, inexplicably, a pressed native orchid with no explanation. They developed a rhythm. Early morning walks before service, when the beach was still empty and the air tasted like possibility. Late night debriefs in his office, reviewing numbers and reservations and guest feedback until the words blurred together. Stolen moments in the walk-in cooler, ostensibly checking inventory, where their hands would brush reaching for the same container and linger just a heartbeat too long. The tension built like steam in a pressure cooker. It was Marcus who finally called it out. So, when are you two just going to fuck and get it over with? He asked one afternoon, while Shea was testing a new dessert, pavlova with finger lime and macadamia praline. She nearly dropped her spoon. Excuse me? You and Tau. Marcus grinned, fearless in the way that only 6 weeks of surviving Shea's intensity could make someone. The whole staff has a pool going. I've got money on within the month. That's completely inappropriate. but her face burned. Chef, come on. The way he looks at you? The way you light up when he walks into the kitchen? We're not blind. Marcus went back to his prep work. For what it's worth, we're all rooting for you. He's good people. And you make him smile, which is basically a miracle. Shea wanted to deny it, to maintain her professional distance, to insist that nothing was happening and nothing would happen. But that night, when Tau knocked on her suite door at midnight with a bottle of whiskey and questions about the upcoming Michelin inspection, she let him in without hesitation. They sat on her balcony, watching the moon paint silver trails on the water, passing the bottle back and forth. Tell me about your grandmother, Tau said. The one who cooked. Shea took a long drink, feeling the whiskey burn. Shea Monroe. Meanest woman I ever loved. She raised me after my mom left. Worked as a private chef for a family in Pacific Heights for 40 years. She smiled at the memory. She taught me that good food is an act of resistance. That when people try to make you invisible, you feed them something so good they can't look away. Is that what you're doing here? Refusing to be invisible? Maybe. Shea looked at him. What about you? What are you doing here? Tau was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, trying to prove that we don't have to choose. That we can honor the old ways while building something new. That success doesn't have to mean abandoning where you came from. That's lonely, Shea said softly, trying to bridge two worlds. It is. He set down the bottle and turned to face her fully.
It was.
Until you got here. The ocean roared below them. The stars wheeled overhead. And Shea felt something shift, like a tide finally turning. Tau, she whispered. What are we doing? I don't know. His hand found hers on the armrest between them, fingers intertwining with a certainty that belied his words. But I know I can't stop thinking about you. Can't stop watching you move through that kitchen like you were born to command it. Can't stop wanting. He cut himself off. Wanting what? Her heart was a drum. Instead of answering with words, Tau stood, pulling her up with him. He was so tall she had to crane her neck to meet his eyes, had to rise up on her toes when he cupped her face in both hands, when he lowered his head with agonizing slowness, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't pull away. Their lips met, and it was like touching a live wire. The kiss was deep and desperate, tasting of whiskey and want, and all the weeks of restrained desire finally breaking free. His hand slid into her locks, cradling her head like she was something precious and breakable, even as his mouth claimed hers with a possessive intensity that made her knees weak. Shea pressed closer, her fingers finding the pendant at his throat, using it to pull him down, needing him closer, closer, never close enough. She could feel his heart racing against her palm, could feel the tremor in his hands as they moved to her waist, spanning her ribcage, burning through the thin fabric of her tank top. We shouldn't, he breathed against her mouth. I know, she gasped back. It complicates everything. I know. But neither of them stopped. They kissed like they were starving, like they'd been holding back for years instead of weeks. When Tau finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard, foreheads pressed together, hands still tangled in each other. I should go, he said, not moving. You should, she agreed, holding tighter. He laughed, a low, rough sound that vibrated through her. Tomorrow. We'll talk about this tomorrow. Figure out what it means. Tomorrow, Shea echoed. But when tomorrow came, there was no time for talking. The Michelin inspectors arrived unannounced, a team of 3 stone-faced professionals who ordered dishes with the precision of surgeons and evaluated every element with unsmiling intensity. Shea and Tau barely looked at each other during the inspection, both too focused on the performance of a lifetime. The kitchen moved like a machine, every dish perfect, every timing flawless. And when the inspectors left 3 hours later with empty plates and inscrutable expressions, Shea felt like she'd run a marathon. We did everything we could, Tau said, finding her in the walk-in cooler where she'd retreated to breathe. The rest is up to them. I know. She leaned back against the metal shelving, exhausted. I want this so badly. For you. For your grandfather. For the team. For yourself? He moved closer, blocking out the light. That too. His thumb traced the curve of her jaw, and even in the freezing air, she felt herself lean into his touch. Last night was amazing and terrifying, and we can't talk about it here, Shea finished. Tau, if this goes wrong, if we go wrong. We won't. You don't know that. No, he admitted. But I know I've never felt like this before. Like I could burn down the world or build a new one, depending on what you need. His hand slid to cup the back of her neck, thumb stroking the sensitive skin below her ear. Tell me you feel it too. I feel it, she whispered. God, I feel it. They kissed again, slower this time, but no less intense. His free hand found her waist, fingers digging in like he was afraid she'd disappear. She could taste the desperation on his tongue, could feel the way his whole body trembled with restraint. When they finally broke apart, the walk-in cooler felt like a sauna. Tonight, Tau said firmly. After service. Come to my cottage. It wasn't a question, but Shea answered anyway. Okay. Chapter 5. The storm before. Service that night was brutal. A full house, every table booked, and 2 private parties in the event rooms. Shea worked the line alongside her team, calling out orders, adjusting seasonings, making sure every plate that left the kitchen was perfect. Her body moved on autopilot, muscle memory from 1,000 services, 1,000,000 dishes.
But her mind was on Tau.
On the way his hands had felt in her hair. On the sound he'd made when she'd kissed him back. On the promise of tonight hanging between them like lightning before a storm. By the time the last dessert went out at 11 p.m., she was wired and exhausted in equal measure. The team cleaned down in record time, all of them sensing their chef's distraction and working double time to free her. Go, Casey said, practically pushing Shea toward the door. We've got this. Marcus is closing. Go do whatever you need to do. Shea wanted to protest, to insist on staying, to maintain some semblance of professionalism. Instead, she grabbed her jacket and ran. The path to Tau's cottage was dark, lit only by solar lights that flickered in the ocean breeze. The sound of the waves was louder here, a constant roar that drowned out thought. Shea's heart hammered as she climbed the porch steps, as she raised her hand to knock. The door opened before her knuckles made contact. Tau stood in the threshold, barefoot and shirtless, his hair loose around his shoulders and his eyes dark with intent. He'd been waiting for her. The pendant gleamed against his chest, and she could see the full extent of his tattoos now. Traditional designs that covered his shoulders and upper arms in intricate patterns that seemed to tell stories she didn't know how to read.
Shea brat,
He stepped back, letting her enter. The cottage was dim, lit by candles that cast dancing shadows on the walls. Through the windows, the ocean was a black void studded with starlight. Someone, Tau, probably had put music on low, something instrumental with a deep bass that she could feel in her chest. They stood in the living room, facing each other, the air thick with everything unsaid. I don't know how to do this, Shea admitted. I don't know how to be with someone and still be the chef I need to be. I don't know how to balance. Tau crossed the space between them in 2 strides. His hands framed her face, tilting it up, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Then we figured out. Together. You don't have to carry everything alone anymore, Shea. You don't have to prove anything to me. What if I mess this up? What if you don't? He kissed her forehead, her temples, the bridge of her nose. What if this is the thing that makes everything else make sense? Shea's hands found his bare chest, palms flat against the heat of his skin, feeling his heartbeat thunder beneath her touch.
I'm scared.
Me too. He kissed her lips, soft and sweet. Terrified, actually. Because this you matter. More than I expected. More than I'm ready for.
Tau.
Stay with me tonight, he murmured against her mouth. Not because we're lonely or stressed or trying to avoid dealing with feelings.
Stay because you want to. Because you want me.
Because you can't imagine walking out that door. She couldn't. Even if the hotel burned down around them, even if every Michelin inspector in the world was watching, she couldn't walk away from this moment. I want to stay, she whispered. His kiss deepened, his tongue sliding against hers with deliberate intent, tasting and claiming and promising all at once. His hands moved from her face to her waist, pulling her flesh against him so she could feel every inch of his body, the hard planes of his chest, the strength in his arms, the evidence of his desire pressing against her stomach. Shea whimpered into his mouth, her fingers digging into his shoulders for purchase. She'd never felt so small and so powerful at the same time, small in his arms, powerful in the way he responded to her touch, the way his breath caught when her nails scraped down his back. Bedroom. Tau growled against her throat, his teeth grazing her pulse point. Bedroom, she agreed, breathless. He swept her up like she weighed nothing, and Shea wrapped her legs around his waist as he carried her through the cottage. She kissed every part of him she could reach, his jaw, his neck, the shell of his ear. He tasted like salt and something darker, something that made her want to bite down and mark him as hers. The bedroom was simple. A large bed with white linens, more windows facing the ocean, candles already burning on the nightstand. He'd planned this. Hoped for this. Tau set her down on the bed with reverence, his eyes raking over her as she lay back against the pillows. You're so beautiful it hurts to look at you. Shea felt her face heat. She wasn't used to this, to being looked at like something precious instead of powerful.
Tau.
Let me, he said, kneeling on the bed beside her. His hands went to the hem of her shirt, and she lifted her arms, letting him pull it over her head. The sports bra came next, and then his mouth was on her skin, kissing a trail from her collarbone to her breast, his tongue hot and insistent. Shea arched into him, her hands fisting in his hair. The sensation of his mouth on her sensitive skin sent electricity through her body, every nerve ending alive and singing. He took his time, lavishing attention on her, learning what made her gasp, what made her moan, what made her pull him closer with desperate strength. When he finally moved lower, when his fingers hooked into her waistband and pulled her shorts and underwear down in one smooth motion, she was already trembling with anticipation. Look at me, Tau commanded, his voice rough with desire.
She did.
Met his dark gaze as he settled between her thighs, as his breath ghosted over her most sensitive skin. The intensity in his eyes made her feel seen in a way she'd never experienced before. I've thought about this, he confessed, his fingers tracing patterns on her inner thighs that made her shiver. About tasting you. About making you fall apart. Tell me you want it. I want it, Shea gasped, her voice barely more than a whisper. I want you. Please. He lowered his head, and the first touch of his tongue made her cry out. He was methodical and relentless, using everything he'd learned about her in their weeks of tension to take her apart piece by piece. His hands held her hips steady when she tried to arch, his mouth never stopping its delicious exploration. When he slid 2 fingers inside her while his tongue worked magic, Shea shattered. She came hard, her thighs clamping around his head, his name a prayer on her lips. Tau worked her through it, gentling his touch as the aftershocks rolled through her, kissing her inner thighs with devastating tenderness. When he finally lifted his head, his lips were slick and his eyes were wild with desire. That was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Shea pulled him up, kissing him deeply, tasting herself on his tongue. Her hands went to his waistband, fumbling with the button. Your turn. Not yet. He caught her hands, pinning them gently above her head with one of his. I want to make this last. Want to memorize every sound you make, every expression that crosses your face.
Tau.
He kissed her into silence, his body covering hers, skin to skin, heat to heat. They moved together like a dance they'd been practicing for years, rolling across the bed, exploring and claiming and surrendering by turns. His free hand mapped every curve of her body, learning her landscape with reverent attention. When he finally entered her, slowly, watching her face, making sure she was ready, Shea felt something click into place in her chest. This was what she'd been missing. Not just physical connection, but this profound sense of being seen, being matched, being met with equal intensity. They moved together in the candlelight, the rhythm building naturally between them. Tau whispered things in her ear, a mixture of English and words she didn't understand but felt in her bones, words that sounded like promises and prayers. His hands were everywhere, his mouth claiming hers, swallowing her gasps and moans. The pleasure built in waves, each one higher than the last. Shea wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him deeper, meeting him thrust for thrust. The sound of their breathing, the slick slide of skin on skin, the creaking of the bed, it all blended into a symphony of connection. When she came the second time, it was with his name on her lips and tears in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming rightness of it all. Tau followed moments later, his body shuddering, his face buried in her neck, and in that moment of shared vulnerability, Shea knew with absolute certainty that her life had just changed forever. They lay tangled together afterward, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her spine. The candles had burned low, casting long shadows on the walls. The ocean roared outside like applause. I love you, Tau said into the darkness. I know it's too soon, I know we should wait, but I can't not tell you. Shea lifted her head, meeting his eyes. Her heart felt too big for her chest. Say it again. I love you, Shea Monroe. I love your fire and your fierce heart. I love how you command a kitchen and how you soften when you think no one's looking. I love. She kissed him silent. I love you too, she whispered against his lips. And that terrifies me. Good. He pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her like a shield against the world. The best things always do. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, the ocean singing them into dreams, neither of them knowing that the real fight was about to begin. Chapter 6. The Shark Circle. The news came 3 weeks later, on the same day they received confirmation. Azure Bay had earned not just their second Michelin star back, but their third. And the inspector's notes hinted that a fourth was within reach if they maintained consistency. Shea should have been celebrating. Instead, she was in Tau's office, watching him read a legal letter with increasing fury. They can't do this, she said, her stomach sinking. They can. Tau's jaw was tight, his hands gripping the paper hard enough to crumple it. The hotel's parent company is selling. To developers. They want to demolish the building and put up luxury condos. The words hit like a physical blow. But we're finally succeeding. The reservations are booked solid for 6 months. We're making money. Not enough. Not fast enough. He threw the letter on his desk. The developers offered twice the hotel's appraised value. The board already voted. It's done. When? 6 months. We have 6 months to close down operations and vacate the property. Shea sank into a chair, her mind reeling. 6 months. Everything they'd built, everything they'd fought for, gone. The team she'd trained, the menu she'd perfected, the legacy of Tau's grandfather. There has to be something we can do, she said. Legal action, public pressure, something. I'm looking into it. But his voice was defeated. The parent company has the right to sell. And the developers have deep pockets. Politicians, lawyers, all of it. Over the next few weeks, the attacks began in earnest. Supply lines mysteriously dried up. Their fish purveyor suddenly couldn't fulfill orders. The produce company claimed weather issues. The wine distributor said there were distribution problems. Each excuse was plausible on its own, but together they formed a pattern.
Someone was sabotaging them.
It's the developers, Tau said one night, pacing his cottage like a caged animal. They're trying to tank our numbers before the sale goes through. Make it look like a failing investment. Shea sat on his couch, running through contingencies in her mind. So we find new suppliers. Go directly to fishermen, farmers, anyone who will work with us. Which costs more and takes time we don't have. He stopped pacing, frustration rolling off him in waves. They're squeezing us from every angle. And his voice broke. I can't watch them tear down my grandfather's legacy. I can't watch them turn this place into another soulless development. Shea stood, crossing to him. She took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. Then we fight. We document everything. We go public. We make enough noise that they can't just bulldoze this place without consequences. It might not be enough. Then we go down swinging. She kissed him fiercely. You told me the ocean remakes the shore with every tide, that the rocks get stronger. Let them try to break us. We'll just come back harder. The kiss deepened, desperation and defiance mixing into something incendiary. Tau lifted her, and she wrapped her legs around his waist as he carried her to the bedroom. They made love with a kind of frantic intensity, like they were trying to prove they still existed, still mattered, still had power in a situation designed to make them powerless. Afterward, lying in the tangle of sheets, Shea's phone buzzed. A message from Casey. Chef, you need to see this. Link attached. It was a news article. Luxury development planned for indigenous sacred site, hotel to make way for progress. The article barely mentioned the hotel. It focused on the underutilized coastal property and the economic benefits of development. There was a quote from the lead developer. Sometimes we have to let go of the past to build the future. Shea felt Tau go rigid beside her. His eyes scanned the article, and when he looked up, there was something cold and dangerous in his expression. They called it underutilized, he said flatly. My grandfather's kitchen. My people's land. Underutilized.
Tau. No.
He stood, pulling on clothes with sharp, angry movements. No more playing defense. If they want to fight, I'll give them one. Over the next month, the battle escalated. Tau organized protests with local indigenous groups. Shea gave interviews to food journalists, highlighting the cultural significance of the kitchen. They documented every suspicious supply issue, every mysterious health inspection, every too convenient accident that plagued the hotel. But the developers had unlimited resources and no conscience. The health department showed up 3 times in 2 weeks, citing violations that didn't exist. A food critic, later revealed to be paid by the development company, wrote a scathing review calling the menu pretentious and inauthentic. Someone started a rumor that Shea and Tau were having an affair and using hotel resources for personal gain. That last one was close enough to the truth to sting. They're trying to discredit us personally, Shea said, reading the gossip column that had picked up the affair story. Make it look like we're unprofessional. We are having an affair, Tau pointed out. A relationship. We're having a relationship. She looked at him. Should we hide it? Make a statement.
No.
His voice was firm. I'm not hiding you. I'm not pretending you don't matter to me. If they want to use our relationship against us, fine. But I won't give them the satisfaction of acting ashamed. It was the right answer. It was also the one that made things infinitely more complicated. The board called an emergency meeting. Tau was asked to explain the allegations of misconduct. Shea was questioned about her supplier relationships and whether she was accepting kickbacks. They sat in that conference room, surrounded by people in expensive suits who'd never set foot in the kitchen, and defended their integrity while the developers' lawyers took notes for future use. That night, they nearly broke. Maybe we should stop, Shea said, sitting on the beach in front of Tau's cottage, her knees pulled to her chest. Maybe if we step back, focus purely on business, they'll have less ammunition. Tau was quiet for a long time. Then, is that what you want?
No.
The word was immediate, visceral. But I want you to keep this hotel more. It's already gone, Shea. His voice was hollow. The sale is in 4 months. Unless someone comes up with $30 million, this place becomes condos. And my relationship with you. That's the one good thing to come out of this disaster. I won't sacrifice it, even if it costs you everything else. He turned to face her, and in the moonlight, his eyes were fierce. You're everything else. Don't you get that? This hotel, my grandfather's legacy, my connection to this land, it all matters. But you're the reason I keep fighting. You're the reason I haven't given up. Losing this place will destroy me. But losing you? That would end me. Shea felt tears spill over. She climbed into his lap, straddling him on the sand, her hands framing his face. I love you. I love you, so much it scares me. I love you too. He kissed her salt-stained lips. We're going to get through this. Somehow. But as the weeks ticked down, as the developers tightened their grip and the hotel's fate became more certain, that somehow felt increasingly impossible. Until the night before the final board meeting, when everything changed. Chapter 7. The Final Stand. The night before the board meeting, Shea couldn't sleep. She'd been up for 20 hours straight, preparing a presentation to the board, assembling evidence of the developer's sabotage, putting together a final desperate plea to save the hotel. It wouldn't work. She knew it wouldn't work, but she had to try. She was in the kitchen at 3 a.m., testing a new dish, grilled octopus with finger lime and charred kelp, when Tau found her. You should be sleeping, he said from the doorway. Can't. She plated the octopus with shaking hands. My brain won't stop. Keep thinking there has to be something we missed, some angle we haven't tried. Tau moved into the kitchen, coming to stand behind her. His arms wrapped around her waist, his chin resting on top of her head. The solid warmth of him was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. There isn't. I've looked at every option, talked to every lawyer, called in every favor. The parent company has the right to sell, and the developers have the money. It's over. Don't say that. Shea turned in his arms, her eyes burning with unshed tears. Don't give up. I'm not giving up on us. But the hotel, his voice cracked. I have to make peace with it. Have to say goodbye. They stood in the empty kitchen, holding each other as the first light of dawn crept through the windows. Around them, the stainless steel gleamed, the equipment hummed, and the ocean roared its eternal song. Come with me, Tau said finally. There's something I need to show you. He led her out of the hotel, down the path to the beach, and then further, to a part of the property she'd never seen. They climbed over rocks slick with spray, pushed through coastal scrub, until they reached a small cove hidden from the main beach. In the center of the cove was a tide pool, deep and clear, filled with starfish and anemones. And carved into the rock face above it were symbols, ancient markings that had weathered centuries of wind and water. This is a women's site, Tau said quietly. A place of teaching and ceremony. My grandmother brought me here once, when I was young. Told me that the women would come here to share knowledge, to make decisions that would affect the whole community. To remember that wisdom isn't about who's loudest or strongest, it's about who's willing to listen. Shea touched the carvings, feeling the grooves worn smooth by time. The connection to something ancient and enduring made her chest ache. Why are you showing me this? Because I need you to understand that this land, it's more than just property. More than just a hotel or a view or economic potential. It's story. It's memory. It's connection. He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. And when the developers tear it down, they won't just be destroying a building. They'll be erasing this. All of this. Tears streamed down Shea's face. I'm so sorry, Tau. I'm so sorry we couldn't stop them. You have nothing to be sorry for. He pulled her close, his hands coming up to cup her face, thumbs brushing away her tears. You fought for this place like it was your own. You honored my grandfather's legacy. You made me believe in possibility again. He kissed her forehead with such tenderness it made her heart break. Whatever happens today, I want you to know that meeting you, working with you, loving you, that was worth everything. Tau, her voice broke. He kissed her then, soft and slow, like they had all the time in the world instead of hours. His lips moved against hers with a gentleness that was somehow more devastating than passion, a promise that even if they lost everything else, they would still have this. Have each other. Shea melted into him, her hands sliding up his chest to wrap around his neck. The kiss deepened naturally, inevitably, and suddenly they were sinking to the sand, their bodies drawn together by gravity and need, and the desperate desire to feel something good in the face of impending loss. I need you, Shea whispered against his mouth. I need to feel you. Need to remember that something still matters. Everything matters, Tau said, his hands already moving under her shirt, palms hot against her skin. You matter. This matters. They undressed each other slowly, reverently, as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. The hidden cove became their sanctuary, the sound of the waves drowning out the world beyond. When Tau laid her back on the sand, when he covered her body with his, Shea felt like she was being worshipped. He entered her with aching slowness, his eyes locked on hers, and she felt the connection between them. Not just physical, but something deeper. Something that transcended the hotel and the fight and all the practical concerns that had consumed them. They moved together like the tide, building and receding, building again. Tau's hands were in her hair, on her face, tracing the curves of her body like he was trying to memorize her through touch. Every thrust was deliberate, measured, designed to make this last. I love you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. No matter what happens. No matter where we end up. I love you. I love you too, Shea gasped, her body arching to meet his. Always. I'll always love you. The orgasm built slowly, a wave gathering strength far out at sea before crashing to shore. When it finally hit, they came together, crying out into the dawn, their bodies shuddering in perfect synchronization. In that moment of shared release, Shea felt a clarity she'd been missing. They weren't done yet. As they lay tangled together on the sand, the sun fully risen now, Shea felt something shift inside her. A determination. A plan forming in the edges of her mind.
We're not done yet, she said.
Tau lifted his head to look at her, a question in his eyes. And Shea smiled, a fierce, wild smile that promised fire. I have an idea. Chapter 8. The Boardroom Battle. The boardroom was packed. The usual board members sat at the long table, 7 people in business attire who'd barely set foot in the hotel in the past year. But they weren't alone. The developers had brought their own contingent. 3 lawyers, 2 executives, and the lead developer himself, a silver-haired man in an expensive suit who radiated smug confidence. Shea and Tau sat on the opposite side, their presentation materials stacked in front of them. Shea's hands were steady. Her mind was clear. She'd been underestimated her whole life. One more time wouldn't break her. The chairman called the meeting to order. We're here to finalize the sale of Azure Bay Hotel to Coastal Horizons Development. The terms have been agreed upon. This is simply a formality. Actually, Shea said, standing. We have new information that the board needs to consider before any sale is finalized. The developer's lead lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, looked irritated. Ms. Monroe, this isn't your decision to make. You're an employee. An employee who can document systematic sabotage designed to lower this hotel's value before the sale. Shea opened her folder. We have emails, phone records, and testimony from suppliers who were approached by representatives of Coastal Horizons and told to suspend service to Azure Bay. We have evidence of paid negative reviews. We have documentation of health inspections requested by anonymous tips that coincidentally came from IP addresses registered to your company. The room went silent. The chairman leaned forward. Those are serious allegations. With serious evidence. Tau stood beside Shea. Coastal Horizons hasn't just been purchasing property. They've been actively destroying a functioning business to justify their development, which, I might add, is built on land with significant indigenous heritage value. Land that should require cultural heritage assessment before any development proceeds. The developer's team shifted uncomfortably. Furthermore, Shea continued, her voice gaining strength, the hotel is not failing. Despite the sabotage, we maintained a 3 Michelin star rating. Our reservations are sold out for 8 months. We're profitable. The only reason the board is considering the sale is because Coastal Horizons offered an inflated price, a price they could only justify if this property is worth more demolished than operational. This is all very interesting, the lead developer said, his tone condescending, but it doesn't change the fundamental facts. The parent company wants to sell. We want to buy. Ms. Monroe's conspiracy theories are documented with evidence that we're prepared to take to the media, Tau interrupted, and to the Indigenous Land Council, and to every environmental and cultural heritage protection agency in Australia. He paused. Unless you'd like to reconsider your offer. The developers conferred in whispers. The board members looked uncertain. And then the chairman spoke. Even if we were to reject this sale, the parent company still wants to divest the property. Unless someone else is prepared to make an offer. I am. Every head in the room turned toward Tau. Shea's heart stopped. What was he doing? Tau pulled a folder from his briefcase. Not the one they'd prepared together. Something else. Something she hadn't seen. My name is Tau David Kalani, he said, his voice steady. Son of James Kalani. Grandson of David Kalani, who served as head chef here for 17 years. But I'm also the grandson of Margaret Wakefield Kalani, my grandmother, who happened to be the only daughter of Thomas Wakefield, founder of Wakefield Industries. Shea's mind reeled. Wakefield Industries, one of Australia's largest mining and manufacturing conglomerates, worth billions. My grandmother married against her father's wishes, Tau continued. Married an Indigenous man at a time when that was scandalous. Her father disowned her, but when he died 15 years ago, he left his entire estate in a trust for his descendants. A trust I've never touched. He placed documents on the table. Until now, I'm prepared to offer $35 million for Azure Bay Hotel. $5 million more than Coastal Horizons. With the stipulation that the land be placed under Indigenous heritage protection and that current staff be retained. The room erupted in chaos. Shea couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Tau, the man who lived in a beach cottage, who wore hand-carved jewelry and spoke about connection to land, was offering $35 million like it was pocket change. The chairman banged his gavel. Mr. Kalani, this is highly irregular. It's a legitimate offer. Tau's lawyer, when had he gotten a lawyer, stood. One that addresses the parent company's desire to divest while preserving a profitable business and protecting culturally significant land. My client is prepared to transfer funds within 72 hours. The developers were furious. Their lead lawyer stood, sputtering objections. But the numbers didn't lie. $35 million was more than their offer. And Tau had documentation proving he had access to the funds. The board called for a recess. Shea followed Tau out of the conference room, her legs shaking. They made it to an empty hallway before she grabbed his arm, spinning him to face her. You bought the hotel, she said, her voice somewhere between shock and fury. You bought the hotel, without telling me. I couldn't tell you. His eyes were intense, pleading with her to understand. If the offer fell through, if the trust wouldn't release the funds, I didn't want to give you false hope. You have $35 million.
Had.
Now I have a hotel. He took her hands. Shea, I know this changes things. Changes things? Tau, you've been living like some kind of monk, and the whole time you're secretly wealthy. I'm not wealthy. I gave it all away. He gestured toward the conference room. Everything. The entire trust. It's all going into the hotel now. Into preserving this place, protecting the land, keeping your kitchen running. Shea's anger deflated. You gave away a fortune. For this. For this. For my grandfather's legacy. For the land. His thumb stroked her wrist.
For you.
For us. For the chance to build something that matters. I don't need you to rescue me, she said, but her voice was soft. I know. You're the least rescuable person I've ever met. He smiled. But this isn't about rescue. It's about partnership. I have money I never wanted. You have talent and vision and fire. Together, we can make this place everything it should be. Everything my grandfather dreamed of. The conference room door opened. The chairman beckoned them back in. The vote was unanimous. The parent company accepted Tau's offer. Azure Bay Hotel was his. Theirs. As the developers stormed out and the board members offered stilted congratulations, Tau turned to Shea. And then, in front of everyone, he dropped to one knee. Shea Monroe, he said, pulling a ring from his pocket, a stunning piece of gold, an opal that caught the light like captured fire. I didn't just buy this hotel. I bought a future. Our future. I want to wake up to your fire every morning. I want to fight beside you, build beside you, love beside you. Will you run this empire with me? Will you marry me? Shea looked down at this man, this impossible, beautiful, infuriating man who'd just given away a fortune to save a kitchen and protect a legacy. This man who saw her, really saw her, and loved her anyway. You're insane, she said. Completely. He grinned. Is that a yes? She pulled him up, kissing him hard enough to bruise, not caring who was watching. When she finally pulled back, she was crying and laughing at the same time. Yes, she said. Yes, you ridiculous man. Yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Of course it did. As they stood in that boardroom, surrounded by the wreckage of the developers' plans and the promise of their shared future, Shea tasted salt on her lips, his tears or hers. She couldn't tell, and felt the grit of sand from their early morning walk still between her toes. The taste of salt and sand. The taste of home. Epilogue Empire. 6 months later, Azure Bay Hotel earned its 4th Michelin star, the first hotel restaurant in Australia to achieve the honor. The ceremony was held on the beach, with the staff and local community gathered under string lights as the sun set over the Pacific. Shea stood at the outdoor kitchen they'd built for special events, Tau beside her, their hands intertwined. Casey had been promoted to sous chef. Marcus was running the pastry program. The team had grown to 20, with a waiting list of young cooks desperate to learn from the woman who'd transformed one of Australia's most storied kitchens into a global destination. But the real transformation went deeper than stars or accolades. Tau had restructured the hotel entirely. Half the profits now went to indigenous cultural programs and land conservation. They'd hired local people for management positions, created training programs for indigenous youth interested in hospitality, and established a scholarship fund in David Kalani's name. The herb garden had expanded into a full indigenous food garden, open to the public for educational tours. They'd commissioned local artists to create pieces for the hotel, turning every hallway into a gallery of contemporary Aboriginal art. And they'd opened the women's site, with appropriate permissions and protocols, as a teaching space. Azure Bay wasn't just a hotel anymore. It was a movement. How does it feel? Tau asked, watching Shea accept her 4th star from the Michelin representative. Terrifying, she admitted. Now we have to maintain it. We will. He kissed her temple. Together. That night, after the celebrations ended and the guests returned to their rooms, Shea and Tau walked down to the hidden cove. The tide pool reflected starlight, and the ancient carvings seemed to glow in the moonlight. Do you ever regret it? Shea asked. Giving up the money? Tau pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her from behind, his chin resting on her head. Not for a second. Money is just paper, Shea. This. He gestured to the cove, the ocean, the land. This is real. This is legacy. And you. He turned her to face him. You're everything. The moonlight painted silver across his features, and Shea felt her breath catch. Even after 6 months of marriage, after building this empire together, after countless nights wrapped in his arms, he still had the power to make her heart race. I have something for you, she said, reaching into the pocket of her dress. She pulled out a small wrapped package and handed it to him. Tau's eyebrows rose in surprise. What's this? Open it. He carefully unwrapped the paper to reveal a small wooden box. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a pendant, a matching piece to his bone hook, but carved in jade with both traditional patterns and something new, intertwined designs that represented both their heritages, coming together to create something unique. Shea. His voice was thick with emotion. I had it commissioned by the same artist who made your grandfather's pendant, she explained. I wanted you to have something that represented us, what we've built, who we are together. Tau pulled her into a kiss that stole her breath, his hands cradling her face, like she was the most precious thing in the world. When they finally broke apart, he was smiling through tears. Help me put it on? She fastened the pendant around his neck, her fingers lingering on his skin. The 2 pendants rested side by side against his chest, past and future, tradition and innovation, everything they'd fought to preserve and everything they'd dared to create. It's perfect, he whispered. You're perfect. I'm really not, Shea laughed. Ask Marcus. I made him cry last week over a failed reduction. Perfectly imperfect, then. Tau's hands slid down to her waist, pulling her flesh against him. And perfectly mine. The kiss this time was different, deeper, hungrier, flavored with celebration and relief, and the kind of desire that comes from truly knowing someone. His hands moved over her body with the confidence of familiarity, knowing exactly where to touch, how much pressure to apply, what would make her gasp. Here, Shea asked breathlessly, as his lips moved to her neck. Anyone could see. No one comes here but us. His teeth grazed her pulse point, making her shiver. This is our place. Our sanctuary. He walked her backward toward the smooth rock face, pressing her against the ancient carvings with reverent care. His hands found the zipper of her dress, slowly drawing it down as his mouth continued its exploration of her throat, her collarbone, the sensitive spot behind her ear. You're wearing too many clothes, Shea complained, her fingers fumbling with the buttons of his shirt. Tau laughed, low and rich. Impatient tonight, chef? We just won our 4th star. I think I'm entitled to celebrate however I want. However you want. His eyes darkened with promise as he shrugged out of his shirt. Is that a challenge? Before she could answer, he dropped to his knees in front of her, his hands sliding up her legs, pushing her dress higher. The position, him kneeling before her, looking up with such raw desire and reverence, made her feel powerful and cherished all at once. Tau. Her protest died as his mouth found her inner thigh, kissing and nipping a path upward. You've worked so hard, he murmured against her skin. Let me take care of you. Let me worship you the way you deserve. His fingers hooked into her underwear, sliding them down and off. The ocean breeze was cool against her heated skin, but Tau's mouth was hot as he tasted her, his tongue moving with practiced skill that made her knees buckle. Shea's hands fisted in his hair as he worked magic between her thighs, one of his hands reaching up to intertwine with hers against the rock face. The dual sensation, his mouth driving her toward madness while his hand grounded her, was overwhelming. That's it, he encouraged, his voice muffled but intense. Let go, Shea. I've got you. She came with his name on her lips, her body shaking with the force of it. Tau stood, catching her as her legs gave out, his arms strong and sure around her. Beautiful, he breathed, kissing her deeply so she could taste herself on his tongue. So damn beautiful. Shea fumbled with his belt, needing him inside her, needing that connection.
Now.
Please. He lifted her easily, her legs wrapping around his waist as he braced her against the rock. When he entered her, they both groaned at the sensation, the perfect fit, the rightness of it. They moved together under the stars, surrounded by the evidence of ancient wisdom and the promise of their shared future. Every thrust was deliberate, purposeful, designed to bring them both to the edge. Tau's forehead pressed against hers, their breath mingling, their eyes locked. I love you, he said as they climbed higher together. My fire, my heart, my empire. I love you too, Shea gasped. My strength, my home, my everything. They came together, crying out into the night, their bodies shuddering in perfect harmony. In that moment of shared ecstasy, surrounded by ocean and stone and starlight, Shea felt complete in a way she'd never imagined possible. Afterward, they sank to the sand, legs tangled together, hearts still racing. Tau wrapped his shirt around her shoulders, and they sat watching the waves crash against the rocks, the rhythm eternal and comforting. Thank you, Shea said softly. For what?
For seeing me.
For challenging me. For building this with me. She gestured to encompass not just the cove, but everything, the hotel, the kitchen, the life they'd created. For choosing me. Choosing you was the easiest decision I ever made. Tau kissed her temple. Everything else? That was the hard part, but we did it. Together. They sat in comfortable silence, the weight of their achievement settling over them like a blessing. 4 Michelin stars. A thriving hotel. A legacy preserved and reimagined. A love that had weathered storms and emerged stronger. What's next? Shea asked. Tau smiled. Whatever we want. We've got time, resources, and a kitchen full of talented people. The world is ours. Not the world, Shea corrected, looking out at the endless Pacific. Just this little piece of it. But it's enough. More than enough. It's everything, Tau agreed. As they stood to make their way back to the cottage, Shea took one last look at the cove, at the ancient carvings that had witnessed their transformation, at the tide pool reflecting stars, at the land that had become their foundation. They walked hand in hand up the path, the sound of the ocean following them like a benediction. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new battles to fight. But tonight, they had each other, they had their empire, and they had the taste of salt and sand and forever on their lips. In the cottage, they made love again. Slower this time, sweeter, taking the time to savor every touch, every kiss, every whispered word. And when they finally fell asleep wrapped around each other, they dreamed of oceans and kitchens and ancient stones, of grandmothers and legacies and the bridges they'd built between worlds. The taste of salt and sand. The taste of home. The taste of love that would last a lifetime.
The end.